Now, you ask specifically about one decision that was made by the National Labor Relations Board. The NLRB, and this relates to Boeing. Essentially, the NLRB made a finding that Boeing had not followed the law in making a decision to move a plant. And it's an independent agency. It's going before a judge. So I don't want to get into the details of the case. I don't know all the facts. That's going to be up to a judge to decide. What I do know is this, that as a general proposition, companies need to have the freedom to relocate. They have to follow the law, but that's part of our system. And if they're choosing to relocate here in the United States, that's a good thing. And what it doesn't make, what I think defies common sense, would be a notion that we would be shutting down a plant or laying off workers because labor and management can't come to a sensible agreement. So my hope is that even as this thing is working its way through, everybody steps back for a second and says, look, if jobs are being created here in the United States, let's make sure that we're encouraging that. And we can't afford to have labor and management fighting all the time. At a time when we're competing against Germany and China and other countries that want to sell goods all around the world. And obviously, the airplane industry is an area where we still have a huge advantage. And I want to make sure that we keep it. Mark Lander. Question, thank you very much, Mr. President. Yesterday, Admiral McRaven testified before Congress that he was concerned that There wasn't a clear procedure to be followed if a terrorist were captured alive abroad. The administration has also been clear that it doesn't. Want to continue to send suspected terrorists to Guantanamo. What message do you have for American men and women in uniform who are undertaking missions? Like the very risky one to capture and kill bin Laden, about what they should do in the event that they capture someone alive. And does the lack of these clear procedures raise the risk that forces might be more inclined to kill suspected terrorists in the field, rather than capture them alive? Thus depriving the US of the intelligence that they could provide? President Obama, well, first of all, my top priority in each and every one of these situations is to make sure that we're apprehending those who would attack the United States. That we are getting all the intelligence that we can out of these individuals, in a way that's consistent. With due process of law, and that we try them, we prosecute them, in a way that's consistent with rule of law. And, frankly, there are going to be different dispositions of the case depending on the situation. And there are going to be some times where a military commission may be appropriate. There are going to be some times where Article 3 courts are appropriate in terms of prosecution. And we do have a process to work through all the agencies. Department of Defense, Department of Justice, FBI, anybody else who might be involved in these kinds of operations. To think through on a case-by-case basis how a particular individual should be dealt with. and I think that when it comes to our men and women in uniform who might be carrying out these missions, the instructions are not going to be based on whether or not the lawyers can sort out how we detain them or how we prosecute them. Their mission is to make sure that they apprehend the individual. They do so safely with minimum risk to American lives. And that's always going to be the priority, is just carrying out the mission. And that message is sent consistently to our men and women in uniform anytime they start carrying out one of these missions. But I think it's important to understand, and the American people need to be assured that anytime we initiate a mission like this, our top priorities are making sure this person is not able to carry out attacks. Against the United States, and that we're able to obtain actionable intelligence from those individuals. And so that mitigates against this danger that you're suggesting that our main goal is. Going to be to kill these individuals as opposed to potentially capturing them. Okay. Mike Emanuel, Fox. Question, thank you, Mr. President. Last week when you gave your Afghanistan drawdown speech, the word victory in terms of the overall war in Afghanistan, was not in your speech. So I'm wondering, sir, if you can define for the 100,000 troops you have in harms. Way in Afghanistan victory in the war, and for their families, as well, sir. President Obama, well, I didn't use victory in my West Point speech, either. What I said was we can be successful in our mission, which is narrowly drawn. And that is to make sure that Al-Qaeda cannot attack the United States of America or our allies or our interests overseas. And to make sure that we have an Afghan government that and an Afghan people that can provide for their own security. We are being successful in those missions. And the reason that we're in a position to draw down 10,000 troops this year and a total of 33. Troops by the end of next summer is precisely because of the extraordinary work of our men and women in uniform. What they've been able to do is to severely cripple Al-Qaeda's capacities. Obviously bin Laden got the most attention. But even before the bin Laden operation we had decimated the middle ranks and some of the upper ranks of Al-Qaeda. They're having a great deal of difficulty operating. A great deal of difficulty communicating and financing themselves, and we are going to keep the pressure on. And in part that's because of the extraordinary sacrifices that have been made by our men and women in uniform in Afghanistan. What we've also been able to do is to ramp up the training of Afghan forces. So we've got an additional 100,000 Afghan troops, both army and police. That have been trained as a consequence of this surge. And that is going to give the Afghans more capacity to defend themselves because it is in our national interest to make sure that you did not have a collapse of Afghanistan in which extremist elements could flood the zone once again. And over time Al-Qaeda might be in a position to rebuild itself. So what I laid out was a plan in which we are going to be drawing down our troops. From Afghanistan after 10 very long years and an enormous sacrifice by our troops. But we will draw them down in a responsible way that will allow Afghanistan to defend itself and will give us the operational capacity to continue to put pressure on Al-Qaeda until that network is entirely defeated. Question: the attack on the Intercontinental Hotel yesterday, sir. And does that concern you that Afghan forces may not be able to step up if these guys are able to attack a high-profile target in the nation's capital? President Obama, well, keep in mind the drawdown hasn't begun. So we understood that Afghanistan is a dangerous place, that the Taliban is still active. And that there are still going to be events like this on occasion. The question is, in terms of overall trend, is Afghanistan capacity increasing? Kabul, for example, which contains a huge proportion of the Afghan population as a whole. Has been largely policed by Afghan forces for quite some time. And they've done a reasonably good job. Kabul is much safer than it was, and Afghan forces in Kabul are much more capable than they were. That doesn't mean that there are not going to be events like this potentially taking place. And that will probably go on for some time. Our work is not done. But as I said in my speech, the tide of war is receding. We have shifted to a transition phase. And much like we've seen in Iraq, where we've drawn down our troops. The remainder of our troops will be coming out by the end of this year, but Iraq has been able to maintain a democratic government, and to tamp down violence there. We think a similar approach makes sense in Afghanistan. But even in Iraq, you still see the occasional attack. These are still countries that are digging themselves out of a lot of war. A lot of conflict. They're dangerous places. And so they're not going to be perfectly safe, even if we were there. But we can improve the chances for the Afghan people to defend themselves. Jim Sayato. Question, thank you, Mr. President. You're aware that Senators Kerry and McCain have a proposal on the Senate. Floor to give you the leeway to continue operations in Libya for a further year. You've just said that this, from the beginning, has been an operation limited in time and scope. Initially you said days. Not weeks. Are you prepared? Are the American people prepared for this operation, with American support, to continue for a further year? And is there any other definition of success than Gaddafi being removed from power? President Obama, well, first of all, Jim, just a slight correction. What I told the American people was that the initial phase where Americans were in the lead would take days, perhaps weeks. And that's exactly what happened, right? I mean, after around 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks. we had transitioned where NATO had taken full control of the operation. So promise made, promise kept.